we need a new generation of gazans to make peace. That it seems evident to everybody. Might be one of the lessons of Parsha Bishalach. So just the beginning of the Parsha, right after all of the plagues, Paro has finally had enough. He's going to send the Jews out, and we read, "Vahi b'shalach Paro et ha'am." When Paro sent the nation out, right? V'lo natan Elohim derech eretz Plishtim. Right? Hashem didn't want to send them on the quick route through the land of the Plishtim, Ki Karofu, because it's too close. Right? Because the people are going to say, we're going to see war, we're going to go back to Egypt. Right? That's the mantra that has been repeated over and over and will be repeated in Bamidbar. Right? We had enough of this. We want to go back to the desert. Sorry, we want to go back to Egypt. We don't want to die here. Let's just go back to slavery and be finished. All right. Vayasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yamsuf. So Hashem takes them in a circuitous route through Yamsuf. Vachamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Right, and the Jews left Egypt armed. Right, they had taken weapons, and they're now armed. This raises a number of questions. Right, forget the maybe the most important question, which is not a textual question, which is when you go through Yamsuf, you end up at Sinai. Right? Didn't we need to go to Har Sinai to get the Torah? Question number one. Question number two, go back to the text. Vayhi b'shalach Paro et ha'am. Paro sent the people. Paro didn't send the people. Hashem took the people out. What kind of formulation is this? Vayhi b'shalach Paro et ha'am. When Paro sent the people out, from where? Hashem forced him out. It should say, Vayehi ka'asher Hashem hotzia b'nei Yisrael. When Hashem took the Jews out, why the focus on Paro? Right? Why? We'll give one more question, although there's more. Right? Why now tell us that the Jews are armed? Right? They took this stuff with them beforehand when they first left. Tell them when they first left. Last week's parsha that they were armed. Why now? So let's start with the second question by He b'shalach Paro et ha'am. Why is it Paro? So that's why I remember Rav Amital in Yeshiva told us that it's important that the nations of the world recognize the legitimacy of the Jewish state, of the Jewish nation. And that, anytime I see these psukim, I always think of that vort from Rav Amital, but today we'll offer a different one. This is a vort from Hanan Porat. And he suggests as follows. And he says, you know what that teaches us? That the Jews had to be forced out by Paro. Paro had to send them out because they didn't really want to go. They weren't ready to go. They were slaves. They didn't want to go. Paro had to send them out. And that's why they're not ready for war. And that's why, possibly, this is now the time, right, that it mentions that they're armed. Because they're not going out as slaves. They're going out as armed, free people, and they're still not ready for war, and they still don't want to go. Now, why is that? So this is something the Rambam writes about in the Moreh Nevuchim. In this nice piece, Hanan Porat actually quotes a piece from the Stipler that says, or Chaim Kanievsky, it says something similar. But the Rambam said it first, so we'll quote the Rambam. He says, people can't change from one extreme to another that quickly. Doesn't work. Right? He explains it in the context of sacrifice and why sacrifices are commanded. But in general, the Rambam believes, and he's probably right, if you're brought up a certain way, right, and it's been ground into you for generations, right, and that's become who you are, that's really hard to change, almost impossible to change. And yeah, they saw the miracles. Yam Suf, all these crazy miracles didn't change who they were. One-time miracles don't change. And they went to Har Sinai, and they got the Torah, and they learned. They didn't do it. At the end of the day, they come to the moment, right? They come to Moshe moment, come to Hashem moment, right? When we get to the spies and they fail. because they can't envision it. They can't see Hashem fighting with them. They can't see themselves. Just can't do it. And therefore, that generation has to die in the desert. And a new generation has to arise, one that was not born in slavery, that was the one that was not of a slave mentality. And only that generation, again, despite the miracles, the wonders, the craziest things the older generation saw, they were so conditioned to slavery for so many years, they could just never break out of it. And therefore, a new generation had to arise to bring the Jews into Eretz Yisrael. And sadly, it seems you wish to God you're wrong, but I don't think we are. Right? The people of Gaza have been so inculcated and raised on hatred, an animosity, a desire to kill the Jew. It might just take a new generation. This generation has to go, right? Maybe it takes some time, as it did in the desert. But when you're raised in a certain way, and brought up and taught, and it's beaten into you, right? Sometimes, despite the wonders you'll see, or despite the arguments people will make, despite the terrible losses, right, that you see around you in Gaza and the destruction of property, and then it doesn't. Right? Sometimes the external stimuli don't matter, won't change the people. And that's why, sadly, I think we'll need a new generation of Gazans, or something else drastic to happen if we're going to see peace. And we hope that the ride there is as smooth and peaceful and as it could be. And that's really, I think, our prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With that, I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom.